Mm-hmm. So, like, I mean, you mentioned a couple of things, for example, end of life cycle garments, but there's only limited technology out there. And if you're talking
Yeah.
about brands, let's say small, medium-sized brands, the volume might not even be enough, or maybe the technology hasn't even caught up to the space. So, would you then maybe rate those area a little bit lightly, or if they have planned away, maybe still preferable? How does that work?
Yeah. Look, I think rather than saying we expect you to do everything, it's more about what's your strategy to minimise waste. And so
Mhm.
we're not going to punish a brand in their rating just because they don't do a specific thing. It's more like the overall heading, whatever it might be, climate change, what's your strategy there? Well, that's generally about your materials choices
Yeah.
when you're a small brand. A large brand, we expect you to set targets to be pushing renewable energy use in your supply chain, etc. But so coming back to end of life, firstly, in some countries, if you're a retailer in some countries, there are actually schemes that you can join. Of course, a small brand cannot set up its own take-back scheme like
Yeah.
a large brand can. But there are some schemes in some countries, the UK being one, where you can take part as a small brand and somebody else does all the back end of that. And also look out for them. But the other aspect, I think, is in design. Like, can you design in such a way?
Circularity. Is
Yeah,
that
design circularity. I mean, yeah, I mean, you don't have to be a huge brand, but you may be a medium-sized brand to start thinking about repair programs but this is where I think pre-competitive cooperation between brands in a particular country can be quite interesting. Like, particularly if your market is mostly a particular country or continent, can you work with others to come up with, I mean, you may not be able to come up with a repair scheme all by yourself, but can you work with others? There are some really interesting startups out there doing all sorts of things about resale, about recycling, about repairs, circularity in general, and trying to make it possible for small brands to participate. So, it's very patchy at the moment, but you could at least look for those sorts of things. And that's sort of, yeah.
But I'm sure you've been rating so many brands. Has there ever been any bad reaction coming from brands? They'll be like, "Why is my rating so bad?" Like, if there is, how do you respond to those? Like, I mean, like this is probably like a side question. I'm just really curious. How does that even work? That when there's bad reaction coming out?
The large brands, they know where their weaknesses are, and they kind of accept if we point them out. The
Yeah.
brands which do get a little bit emotional about it are either ones that are actually dead set awful and just want to pull the wool over our eyes. Like, there's a brand in an Asian country somewhere that has zero going for it in terms of
Yeah.
sustainability and just abused us for giving them a low rating. But we said, well, if you wanted to communicate what you were doing, and they just said, oh, greenwashing. But no, consumers have a right to know
Yeah.
how you are impacting on what they care about. And so if you refuse to talk about it, you're going to get a low rating on Good On You, and there's nothing to do about it. But the other case, which is a little bit more tricky, is people who've created their brand in a way that they think is really sustainable and they're motivated by sustainability, but they're actually not doing very much. They're making things out of usual cotton and maybe a little bit of modal, and maybe they make down the street, but they don't communicate anything about how they treat the workers, and they just know, inverted commas, in their heart that they're really sustainable. And they're quite offended when we say we only rate you 3 out of 5. Now, 3 out of 5 is still in the top half of brands that we rate, but they're not happy about that, and they sort of get emotional about it. So that's only happened once, maybe twice, that we couldn't work through an issue like that. And as I say, we've got more than 3,000 brands that we have listed either now. Yeah.
Right. And I remember early in the conversation you mentioned maybe a dozen of the brands are sitting in the top tier, and 500 of them are in I guess in a kind of like a good rating.
So we think of brands that are rated great or good as doing pretty well. And so we think of them as the brands that are good choices for consumers. There aren't that many rated great. There are a much larger number rated good. And so 600, maybe 650 that are published with ratings around good or great. And, we also accept that if you have specific needs, see, shopping is always going to be a trade-off. Nobody goes out to buy a sustainable piece of clothing. They go out to buy a very specific thing. They want a collared shirt. They want pumps, they want a red dress. You know, they have a specific purpose, and you can't always find what you want from the most sustainable brand. So you always make it. You know, I need a red party dress. There are 3 of them. The brands are rated, you know, It's a Start, not good enough, and we avoid. I actually like the not good enough one better, but It's a Start, yeah, I'm going to buy that one. So, you know, it's that kind of thinking. And also that was more expensive or less expensive. So people, when they're shopping, do make trade-offs, and that's fine. And so often, you know, particularly if you have specific needs, you want, you know, technical running gear, or you need larger sizing or whatever, maybe it's hard to find a brand that's rated good or great. And so feel good about buying a brand that's rated 3, because that's the best option out there, and you can't change that. It's not a perfect world.
Yeah. And your brand has achieved a lot in the past few years, you know, being on Fashion for Good, and then you have strategic partnership with one of the biggest retailer online. And so what is the secret of your success? Like, I mean, how people that's starting out a sustainable brand, how can they learn from you, for example?
Well, I think the first thing we like to say is that we stand in the shoes of consumers. So we're actually trying to do a really good job for one sector primarily, which is shoppers. Mm-hmm. And by doing that, we believe we're delivering good outcomes for the environment and for workers and for sustainable brands. But we're not trying to, you know, obviously our ultimate goal is to make the world a better place, but we're doing that through the lens of the millions and millions of shoppers who want the world to be a better place. And so we're trying to serve them. And we're always trying to make the products, our app and our online directory and our journal and our newsletter, we're always trying to make them better for the shopper, the user. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the first thing. And the second one I'd have to say is, well, you know, is persistence. Like, we've been doing it for a long time. We love that we're working with Fashion Revolution, Fashion Transparency Index, many other people that we've got great advice from. It's great that Emma Watson is a supporter of Good On You. It's great that we've been chosen to go through the F-Lane Accelerator in Berlin, the Fashion for Good Accelerator in Amsterdam, the Far-Fetched Dreamers Accelerator in Lisbon and London. So that's been fantastic for us coming from little old Australia. So, you know, it's very much, I mean, the whole sustainable fashion movement is about collaboration, and it's about us really aggregating and sharing work done by other people, not just sustainable brands, but scientists, civil society organisations, leading brands, industry associations. So it's about understanding how we can bring together and mix up and share with everybody the work that other people have done. Yeah.
So it's persistency, you mentioned, and looking through customers' eyes and see what they need, and strategic partnership in place.
Yeah, collaborations and respect the work of other people. Absolutely. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, it's such a pleasure to have you, Gordon. I think your world of knowledge, specifically in the innovation standpoint, and specifically your app, it really brings a lot of value to a lot of brands, and get a lot of, I think our conversation today can get brands that maybe are not doing so well, that actually learn how they can actually do better as they go. Or maybe brand, they wanted to start up being sustainable at the same time, and how do they actually get, you know, good rating, and what are the things that they, you know, they need to improve so that they can actually get good rating as they go on, you know, when they approach to you, partly make your work easier, and and also partly make their work easier, because then they'll be much more prepared to come on your platform. That's so wonderful.
Thank you. Yeah, we're not, I mean, we're not in the business of giving brands individual advice, because our role is to assess them. But we are interested in working with other people to create tools that brands could use to examine their practices across their supply chain, and identify the easiest things for them to work on first. And so we hope to have some announcements about that maybe by the middle of next year.
Oh, great. Looking forward. Well, thank you so much again for the chat today, Gordon. Really, it's our pleasure to have you, and looking forward to reconnect post-COVID.
Yeah, great to talk to you again, Edwina. I look forward to meeting you soon. Thanks, everybody, for listening.
Yeah.